One of the best pieces of advice I've ever come across was wonderfully explained by a David Foster Wallace quote. While discussing what it was like becoming a professor, he remarked in a radio interview how empty and frustrating it is for a reader to invest their time and attention in something, and to feel that the agenda is basically to show you that the writer is clever. However, perhaps is best said in a blog post by author Adam Grant concerning how to better connect with your audience. Good communicators make themselves look smart. Great communicators make their audiences feel smart. And here's the thing, as much as I loved God of War Ragnarok, it didn't make me feel smart. Being seconds away from solving a puzzle just to have Atreus or Mimir shout that you might want to hit this thing with your axe is really only the tip of the iceberg of how deeply the show don't tell approach to storytelling has been thrown out the window here. And I don't think it's just a Ragnarok issue. Red Dead Redemption 2 was an insane roller coaster for the first dozen or so hours I played it. It's constantly lauded as one of the best video game stories of all time, and I can see it. It's jam-packed with the top voice acting, animation, graphics, and music ever put to games. The plot is nice too. Each and every beat backbones and drives on the themes of redemption, karma, honor. The story heavily relies on player investment in the characters, and it pays off. Arthur Morgan is Arthur Morgan. But that's kind of the issue for me. It's hard to put it into words. It's not that redemption, karma, and honor aren't edgy enough topics. It's not even that they're easy. It's just how often the game beats me over the head with the idea that your choices have consequences. That Arthur is doomed by the badness, and he'll be saved with the gladness. I would have loved to have come across that thought naturally instead of the game telling me I should be thinking it throughout the entire playthrough. And it's funny because, out of most entertainment mediums, game designers are the most familiar with giving their audience freedom. Red Dead Redemption is made by Rockstar, the same company behind open world go and do whatever just be home for supper gameplay. It's kind of silly they won't let you leave the experience with your own thoughts on Arthur's suffering. It's important to note here that I'm not talking about player choice. I'm not suggesting they write and record more voice lines for more options so that Arthur can feel exactly how I want him to. It's just a little overbearing when I'm zeroing in on the target in my head that's labeled genuine thought about Arthur Morgan's doomed life of banditry, and before I'm able to hit it, the subtext of the game screams, you might want to think this thing with your head.
Oh, you're a good man.
One of those moments that stands out the most in God of War Ragnarok is in a path mission with Thrud while you're playing as Atreus. You've been sent out to gather the last piece of the mask, and Thrud is tasked with coming along with you. You and Thrud almost exclusively discuss parental expectations during this arena. Thrud wants nothing more than to become a Valkyrie. She claims it is her calling in life. Her mother forbids it due to the danger, and it's become a wedge in the relationship. She laments these things while Atreus and her find alternate routes through blocked paths, pushing boxes to get to higher grounds and then dropping through the floor. Classic video game stuff. Atreus, meanwhile, talks about his father and their disagreements, the distrust Kratos has for Atreus making his own decisions, and how he wishes Kratos could just trust him to make the right decision.
He's intense. Like he's trying to force me into this mold. But I'm not sure that's me.
Oof. Well, I know exactly what that's like.
Thing is, I don't know what I want.
Unfortunately for Atreus, unlike Thrud, he doesn't know what his life's calling is. With curiosity, he asks something to the effect of, what do you do when you find yourself at a dead end?
Too bad giants have to follow prophecy.
Who cares? Make your own path, just like we've been doing here.
Okay, that's cool. A little heavy-handed, but anything less than a keen eye might not lead you into tying that thought together with that specific level design. In fact, it's pretty good. It opens up some thought into whether the narrative was based on the level or the other way around, and it helps it feel a little bit more cohesive. But when moments like these pop up time and time again, it snowballs into a little game of look of all the things we thought. Because similar to the puzzle moments, the developers behind God of War don't trust their players to be able to figure out these moments all by themselves. Or at least they don't want them wasting time thinking about it. It all leads back to a major discourse on player agency that's been brewing for a while, that railroaded feel that many major titles have these days. The thing is, although I love games with more freedom in the sense of player agency, in fact it's been a while since I finished a game like Ragnarok, the first 2 or so hours of the game were hands down my favorite parts. The breakneck pace of the first story beats, coming back from hunting, being attacked by Freya, and then Thor showing up, and the subsequent battle was, honestly, entrancing. In a way I forgot linear blockbuster games could be. But if I'm giving away my agency in order to take in the tableau of curated moments, I feel that the game can let me think about what I'm watching while I'm watching it. And I don't think the developers are being malicious. I don't think they're twirling their mustaches saying things like, how are we going to make these idiots realize these things? Because looking at a recent interview with Ragnarok game designer Eric Williams, he's quoted saying, "The long-standing arc for the franchise has always been the cycle of fathers and sons. And at the end of the last game we have Kratos saying, we have to break the cycle. The cycle ends here. And we like that, right? It's like, okay, we'll put an end to that, but not all things do end. Like, there are other things that maybe because you're so focused on the big thing, you don't see the little things that are happening. So these kinds of more emotional ideas of grief, remorse, and regret, they're also cycles, and if you're not careful, they're the ones that will really hold you back. So we're trying to make those be a little bit more apparent to them, or that they have to deal with them. That gets deep into the intimate side of storytelling. He doesn't think his gamers are stupid. In fact, him and his team are likely trying their best to show you a deeper story. But they think of it like a game mechanic. The deeper story will be wasted if it's not front and center. Without the little Norse graffiti on the rocks, how are you going to know where to go? Let's take a look at two similar story moments from the game. Both involve Brock, Sindri, and our main characters. Kratos and Brock are on their way to forge a new weapon in order to kill the mind-reading god Heimdall. However, this weapon needs to be forged at the Forge in Svartalfheim, the mysterious primordial forge with the lady that Brock has yet to meet. In fact, Brock and Sindri argue over who should get to go. Sindri looks near terrified that Brock has chosen to meet her. Brock brushes this off as Sindri always trying to take credit for their work. All along the way, Brock is lightly teasing Kratos with this idea of form versus nature. The form of something is not always equal to the nature of it. This is the backbone of dwarven magic. You make your way to the forge, delve underwater in a capsule, and meet a mermaid, the lady of the forge. She takes your materials, a bit of Kratos' blood, and makes a spear, but ignores Brock.
The fuck was that? She acts like I weren't even here.
Mermaids don't speak to our corporeal bodies. They speak to a part of our soul.
Mimir mentions that mermaids can only see a person's soul, and Brock must be missing a part of his. He immediately ties it together that he did in fact die a long time ago in an accident, and his brother Sindri, against his unknown wishes, brought him back to life with a piece missing. It's not so much that Brock wishes he was dead, he just wished he had say in any of that at all. Themes of destiny, choice, and whatnot. Kratos asks for a blessing anyways from Brock, and to try and talk Brock into it, he remarks,
It needs a blessing. Yeah, well, the one to give us the blessing just fucked off into the tomb.
It needs the blessing of a great blacksmith.
What? No, I can't bless shit. I don't have all my soul bits. The blessing wouldn't mean squat.
It is the nature of a thing that matters, not its form.
This is a great moment. It says everything that needs to be said, and it leaves some to the imagination, which is why it's such a groaner moment later on, when Kratos remarks on how he is the form of a killer, but it's not his nature. That's something you would typically leave for the audience to hopefully catch on to. It's a great tie-in. Lovely even. But it should have been our idea, not yours. There's even a bit of meta-commentary a little earlier on.
I taught him all about the nature of the thing and the form of the thing. Become a whole motif.
You're making up words again.
I said it was a motif, and it was beautiful.
You are impossible.
I'm the most possible one.
This is absolutely a moment that Adam Grant and David Foster Wallace were touching on, showing the audience that you, as a writer, are smart, instead of showing the audience that they, as watchers, are smart. There's likely two options for this meta-dialogue. One is that they were worried that the use of the motif would be lost on the audience, and they wanted to tongue-in-cheek make it overt. The other, and I think more likely, is that they thought the use of the motif was already breaching on overt, and they wanted to skirt that inkling of heavy-handedness with an ironic self-reference. However, either way, that moment and the one later with Kratos loses the power of a genuine touchstone the player could have had with that scene. Leaving players with the ability to have that moment be their own would have connected them further to that scene than any meta-commentary could. The other moment holds its cards for quite a bit longer, from that aforementioned scene all the way to post-credits. While gallivanting in Svartalfheim, Brock hits the famously riddle-obsessed Mimir with his own riddle. What gets bigger the more you take away? Mimir spends the rest of the game trying to figure out the answer to this riddle. It comes and goes unassumingly, most often paced as filler dialogue when in a boat or traveling between realms. Usually it comes across as a pretty successful, unsuspecting joke. You nearly forget about it, and Mimir is shown to be weighing it heavily in his head all the while. When you run into Brock at a shop, Mimir will occasionally try and answer. He always gets it wrong. In the post-game favors quest, you can attend Brock's funeral accompanied by literally every dwarf that had a voice line and nobody else. It's a touching moment, a Viking funeral. Kratos says that Brock is one of the few people that he's met along his travels that he calls a friend. Sindri even shows up, all dirty and with no gloves. The music swells.
Sindri. Blockpuss.
A hole.
What?
Gets bigger the more you take away.
When I was playing this, immediately after Mimir said,
A hole.
I said, where his brother used to be. It was a spectacular moment. Sure, what I said was a little trite, but I wasn't making an effort at anything. In fact, quite the opposite. The game was making me say it. It wasn't an ironic self-reference or a little joke, but instead, a reference I had with the game that tied me to a moment in the story. This is one of the few moments in the game that isn't a game of catch in the writer's room, but instead a back and forth between the text, the game, and you, the player. Because this moment got me thinking. The whole game, Mimir is trying to solve this riddle with abstract knowledge. Love, he remarks once. Appetite is his first guess. Lungs is an especially bad guess from him. But when he actually solves it, you realize it was possibly the most practical example possible. A hole. There are some questions that all of the supreme knowledge of the world can't answer, and there are some holes so deep they can only be taken from and never filled. While working on the second draft for the script, I came across an applicable Reddit post from user CTK Shadow. A run-of-the-mill Ask Reddit post with the question, Gamers of Reddit, what video game has the best storyline? The top comments were filled with beloved near-indie titles, games like Disco Elysium, video coming soon, Soma, Planescape Torment, Hades, What Remains of Edith Finch, and Outer Wilds. Some of the bigger games on the list include titles like BioShock, New Vegas, Mass Effect, and Silent Hill 2. These game stories all have one thing in common. They trust their players to figure out the themes all by themselves, ignoring major reveals like in the BioShock Would You Kindly Seen, or whatever happens in Mass Effect, I refuse to play it. These games trust the player to figure out what the story means to you. This can be a visceral design choice, like in the mysterious Outer Wilds, Silent Hill, and Soma, where your entire playthrough can be described as trying to figure out the story at all, let alone the themes. Or more esoterically, like in Disco Elysium, video coming soon, Planescape, Hades, and New Vegas, where it's up to the players to take away from the game what they'd like. What do you take away from a Hades playthrough? Themes of a father-son relationship and the distrust that can arise from secrecy? Or perhaps you think more about the banal reality of taking care of an actual eternal home for the damned and the dead? Or what do you take away from a New Vegas playthrough, where you're just a pawn in a much bigger game called Survival, where who and what you align with is just as immediate and important as what you drink and eat? Does a playthrough where you're aligned with Caesar's army leave you in a different mental place than one with Yes Man or Mr. House? There's a plethora of themes available to find in Disco Elysium that we'll be discussing in a video.
Alright! Yeah!
Meanwhile, a cursory glance at the Game Awards' recent winners of Best Narrative tell a different story. Last year it was Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Is it good? I haven't touched it. I saw a clip where Star-Lord had to kill his mom, so it must be dramatic. Then it was The Last of Us Part 2, oops, a good one, and Red Dead Redemption 2. Narrative games, like good movies and books, aren't meant to only live with you while you experience them. They should float around in your head long after. They should invite subsequent playthroughs, and they should trust in you to be a smart little girl and boy who can figure out, oh, this game's about self-fulfilling prophecies and the ability to break yourself from who you thought you were destined to be. I loved God of War. I played the ever-living shit out of it. Every side quest, every Crucible challenge, I just beat Gnaw yesterday. But it's a very hand-holding experience.
If we can release the water from the dam, it should gain us access to more of the crater. Found something else for the cleansing pond, eh?
No door. But there must be a way inside.
Another Drekkie!
The native wildlife stands no chance while it's alive. We must follow it.
Get that thing to shut up!
Surely that's unjam the wheel.
Maybe the crank wheel. This spirit may have the answers you seek.
Doesn't seem like we can cross. Not yet, anyhow.
The water flows again. Let's see what changed. The water's dropped. There's a new path across.
That's where the Drekkie feed. Let's get ready. Won't be much time for fussing once the fighting starts.
We've all seen the famous Ubisoft UX designer tweet about Elden Ring's user experience, or the Ubisoft quest designer deriding Elden Ring's quest. I'd imagine both those disciplines being quite hard to master, a constant balancing act of freedom versus coddling, of making your players feel cramped, or them becoming immediately lost on a previously thought trivial task. But as much as they try to quote-unquote cleverly lead you to the proper path or puzzle result, the story and quest designers lead you to what to take from the game, how to think about it. I recently heard something that really clicked for me. Another YouTuber said, sometimes when something is really good, all you can do is talk about the bad things. And that's what I've been doing. God of War Ragnarok is a crowning achievement, as are all of the other games that won Best Narrative at the Game Awards in the past couple of years. But I would love if games could shake their self-reference and trust in their audience just a little bit more. Let's close with a full quote from David Foster Wallace. It's a little meandering, it's not entirely applicable, but, well, I'm sure you can figure it out. You teach the reader that he's way smarter than he thought he was. I think one of the insidious lessons about TV is the meta lesson that you're dumb. This is all you can do, this is easy, and you're the sort of person who just really wants to sit around in a chair and have it easy. When in fact there are parts of us, in a way, that are a lot more ambitious than that. And what we need is seriously engaged art that can teach again that we're smart. And that's the stuff that TV and movies, although they're great at certain things, cannot give us, but that have to create the motivations for us to want to do the extra work, to get those other kinds of art. Which is tricky because you want to seduce the reader, but you don't want to pander or manipulate them. I mean, a good book teaches the reader how to read it. Thank you for watching Andor Media.